Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the Supremely Enlightened One. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Fellow monks, meritorious lay disciples, today we've been listening to a very beautiful sutta, the Payasi Sutta, and we've heard about all the sorts of ignoble research, of bad research that this Prince Payasi was doing. He held very wrong views. He believed that there were no other worlds for beings to be reborn in. He believed that there were no beings who were spontaneously reborn. He didn't believe that there were results of good and bad action. And he tried to investigate these things in a very unskillful way, not understanding the nature of this world, not understanding the true nature of these other worlds, not understanding about the results of good and bad actions. He tried in many ways to prove that his views were wrong, and he had convinced himself that he was correct, that other people were incorrect. But he had the very good fortune one day to meet a Venerable Bhante, an Arahant monk. Step by step, he explained to him how the research that he had been doing was incorrect, was not good research. So, after a long conversation, eventually this Bhante had convinced him that he was holding wrong views. But now, the prince, he still wouldn't let go. Why is that? He said, I'm a very famous person. People know the kind of views that I hold. When they hear that I'm holding these views that you teach, then they'll criticize me because they have wrong views. So I'm going to continue to hold on to my wrong views out of anger, contempt, and spite. Right? So this prince was more concerned about what other people thought about him than the consequences of holding wrong views. The Blessed One taught very clearly that even these actions that we do with our mind, even holding wrong views, is an unwholesome type of action, and it can lead to rebirth in a bad destination. But this prince, he was more concerned about what other people thought. He didn't want to have other people with wrong views criticize him when he adopted right views. So, again, the Venerable Bhante tells him a story to help him understand what a dangerous thing he's doing. He says, once there was a great caravan traveling through the countryside. So it used to be that if people in a town wanted goods, things that weren't made in that town, a merchant had to bring them from far away. And it was a very dangerous thing to do, right? It's not like they didn't have highways like we have now. They didn't have rest stops. They didn't have police stations along the way. So this journey was a very dangerous thing. If they did it successfully, they could make a lot of money. But if things went wrong, then they might even end up dying. So once there was a very large caravan traveling with lots of goods. There were 1,000 carts in this caravan. And it was divided into two sections. And there was a leader for each of these sections. And they each had 500 carts. And because their caravan was so big, wherever they went, they would use up whatever grass, whatever water, whatever firewood they could find. So they had to carry a lot of this with them. If they wanted to be sure that they would have water to drink, they had to carry pots of water. So not only did they have to carry the things that they were going to sell, but they had to carry water, they had to carry food for their animals that were pulling the wagons, and they would have to carry firewood to cook their food. So they decided that their group was just too big, that they should split up and send one group on ahead first, and then the other group would stay behind for a few days and wait for new grass to grow, wait for the water to become clear again, so they would be able to find more things that they needed along the way. So the first half of the caravan set out. And when they were about to enter a very dangerous part of the jungle, they looked ahead and they saw that there was a man riding on a donkey, pulling a wagon behind him. And this man was covered with, he had garlands of water lilies around his neck. His hair was wet, his clothes were wet, and the wagon, it was covered with mud. And also, he had eyes that were glowing red. So how about this strange person, right? He's all wet, covered with water, but he has these very dark, evil-looking red eyes. And he comes up to the first caravan, and he says, "Oh, sirs, where are you going?" And they say, "Oh, we're going to such and such a place on the other side of this jungle." And he says, "Oh, I've just come from that area. This is a very beautiful jungle. It's full of water, full of lotus ponds. There's lots and lots of grass, lots and lots of firewood. If you're carrying those things with you, you don't need them. Don't worry about these things. You can get rid of them. If you get rid of all this water, this grass, this firewood that you're carrying, then you'll be able to travel very quickly. Your animals won't have to work so hard. So just get rid of all those things." And the leader of this first caravan thought, that sounds like good advice, right? See this man, he's all wet. You know, he has these glowing red eyes, but we won't worry about that, right? We won't worry about that. And so this first caravan leader, he told all the people in the caravan, "Okay, good news. There's water up ahead. There's lots of food for our animals up ahead. Lots of firewood. We can dump out all the water jars. We can leave behind all this extra grass, all this extra firewood, and we can go quickly through the forest." So they did this, and then they went into the jungle. But that man that came to them, he was not a friend. He was not really concerned about their welfare. He was a yaka who disguised himself as a human being. And when they got into this jungle, they saw that there were no lotus ponds. There was no clean water. There was no grass for the animals to eat. There was no firewood for them to cook their food. But what had they done? They had gotten rid of all these provisions, all the things that would have taken them through the jungle safely. So they became very exhausted, very tired, and one night when they were sleeping, this yaka came and he ate all of them, leaving nothing behind but their bones and their wagons. Then, a few days later, just like planned, the second caravan sets out and heads into this jungle. And this second caravan as well is approached by this man with the dark red eyes, with the wet hair, the wet clothing, with garlands of water lilies. And this man says to the second caravan leader, "Oh, sir, if you're going through this jungle, you don't need to bring any extra water. You don't need to bring any extra food for your animals. You don't need to bring any extra firewood. You can leave all that behind and travel very quickly, very fast through this jungle." But this second caravan leader, he was very wise. He didn't trust this man. he said to his people, this guy with these dark red eyes says that we're headed into a safe place, but we don't know him. We've never seen him before. We don't have any reason to trust him. I don't think he's a very good person. I don't see why he'd be so concerned about our welfare. Let's not get rid of our extra water. Let's not get rid of our extra food, our extra firewood. And let's go through this jungle. So they do, and just like the second leader thought, they weren't able to find any extra water, any extra grass, any extra firewood. So they stayed strong, using their own provisions, going through this jungle. And eventually they found that first caravan that was left behind, with the carts and all the goods still in them. And the second leader thought, yep, this first group, they must have paid attention to that man. It must have been a yaka in disguise, who then came and ate. He ate them all up. So now, let's take whatever things are valuable from their caravan, leave all the things behind that we have that are not so valuable, all the goods that we were going to trade. So now we can go ahead into this city with only the most valuable goods. So they took them, and they were able to make it through the jungle, went to the city, and were able to make a great profit, because they had followed the advice of this second caravan leader, and not the advice of the yaka that had come into the jungle to try and trick them. And so the Venerable Kumara Kassapa says, just in the same way, Prince, you can't pay attention to everything that you hear. You have to be very careful with who you're associating with, whose opinions you value. Right now, you're valuing the opinions of foolish people, people who don't have right view. And if you follow their instructions, if you care about what they have to say, then surely you're headed for danger. You won't have any good results from following their instructions. But if you follow the instructions of a wise person, then surely you'll experience good results. And Prince Payasi still wouldn't give up. He said, but they're going to criticize me, right? I don't want them to do that. I'm going to continue to preach these views that I hold. So the Venerable Kumara Kassapa said, okay, let me tell you another story. Once there was a pig farmer, and he was traveling. And on his way back home, he saw that someone had taken and thrown away a big pile of dung, a big pile of animal excrement. And when he saw that pile of dung, he thought to himself, this is great. I can feed this dung to my pigs, because that's what pigs like to eat. They eat excrement. Don't be reborn as a pig. It's not a very good life. But this farmer, he cared about his pigs. And he saw the dung, and he thought, okay, I will take this dung to my pigs. So he took off the cloak that he was wearing, he set it on the ground, and he piled up this dung in the cloak, tied it together, and he put it as a bundle on top of his head. So on his way back, all of a sudden it started to rain. No one was expecting rain, but it started to rain. And as it rained, what do you think happened to that bundle of dung on this pig farmer's head? It got all wet, and soon water was running off of this pile of dung, covering him with filthy slime, with all sorts of excrement, right down to his fingertips. So as he's walking back into his village, people saw him, and they said, "What are you doing? Why do you have all that dung all over you? You must be crazy. Why are you walking around like this?" And the pig farmer says, "No, no, no. I'm not crazy. This is food. I got free food for my pigs. You're the ones who are crazy." Right? See what this silly farmer did? He thought he was doing something good. He thought he was doing the right thing by bringing food to his pigs, but he didn't do it in the right way. Even when he was being covered with excrement, he didn't put down this bundle. Right? He held on to it very tightly. And wise people who saw him knew that he was very foolish, that he was doing very foolish things. So the Venerable Bhante says to the prince, in the same way, right, you're holding on to these wrong views. Wise people will see you and know that you're very foolish, holding tightly onto your wrong views, even though you know that they're wrong. Please, Prince, give up your wrong views. Let go of these wrong views. And the prince says, Bhante, no, I still won't give up my wrong views. People will gossip about me, right? These other people with wrong views, they'll criticize me. So the Venerable Kassapa says, okay, let me give you another story. Let me try and explain to you, how dangerous this is. So he says, once there were some gamblers, and they were using dice, right? So little squares with numbers on them. They were throwing the dice, betting on the throws that they would make. And there was one gambler who, he was fine as long as he was winning, but then whenever he would lose, whenever he would throw a bad throw and be about to lose his money, he would hide one of those dice. He would put it in his mouth secretly and pretend that the dice had gotten lost and say, oh, well, that round's no good, right? In that way he would cheat and not have to lose his money. So not only was he a gambler, right, but he was a cheating gambler as well. So the other gamblers, there was another gambler playing with him, and he couldn't figure out why. For a long time things would be going good for this gambler, but then all of a sudden the dice would get lost. So he watched very carefully, and then he saw what he was doing. And he took the dice and said, let's make an offering with these dice for good luck. So he took the dice and secretly he covered them with poison, because he knew what this cheating gambler was going to do. So then afterwards they would play again with the dice, and again, as long as this first gambler was playing well, he would keep going. But then when things went wrong, he would put the dice in his mouth, pretend that they had gotten lost. But this time, as soon as he put them in his mouth, the poison started to work, and he got very sick and collapsed. And the other gambler then uttered this verse to him. He said, the dice is smeared with burning stuff, though the swallower doesn't know it. Swallow cheat and swallow well, bitter it will be like hell. So the Venerable Bhante says, in the same way, Prince, right? You're going along doing bad things. You don't realize the results, the bad things that are going to happen to you. Just like you were taking poison, right? You're holding on to these wrong views. Surely you'll do bad things because of these wrong views. Bad things with your body, bad speech, bad things with your mind. Just think back to all the terrible ways that this prince tried to kill people because he didn't think that there were results of good and bad actions. But the prince still said, no, Bhante, I'm not ready to give up these bad actions, to give up these wrong views. He says, for a very long time I've held on to these wrong views. And so the Venerable Bhante says, okay, let me tell you another story. Let me explain to you about this holding on and how unbeneficial it is. So he says, Prince, once there was a certain neighborhood, and all the people in that neighborhood had to leave. They had to go move somewhere else. And there were two people in another village that heard about this. They heard that these people had left this village, this other village. And they thought, maybe in their hurry to leave, they would have left something good behind. Why don't we go and investigate see if we can find anything good that they left behind. So they went, and when they got there, they saw a big pile of hemp. So hemp is a type of fiber that people make string out of. Some people even make clothing out of it. So these two men, they saw the hemp and they thought, great, we can use this hemp. Let's take this hemp back with us to our village. So they bundled up and carried it on their heads and went away. But as they were walking, they saw some hemp thread. So same kind of material, but someone had made it into thread. So the first man said, "Oh, this is great. This is why we were carrying along this hemp. We were going to use it to make hemp thread. So now we found some hemp thread. Let's put down our bundle of hemp, and we'll pick up the hemp thread, and we'll use that." But the second man said, "I don't think so. I've carried this hemp a long way, and it's bundled up really well. I'm just going to keep this hemp. You do whatever you want." And so the first man, he picks up the hemp thread, and he keeps walking. But the other man, he keeps the other bundle of hemp on his head. They keep walking, and what do you think they see? But some hemp cloth. So someone's already taken the thread and made it into cloth. So the first man says, "Look, this is why I was carrying this hemp thread, right? This is why you're still carrying that hemp. Let's put all this down and take a bundle of hemp cloth, and in that way we'll save ourselves some time and we'll be able to enjoy that cloth." The second man says, "I don't think so. I've carried this hemp a long way. It would be a shame to waste all that effort. And it's tied up really well. I'll just keep this bundle of hemp. But you do whatever you want." So the first man, he puts down his bundle of thread and picks up the cloth. And as they keep going, then what do they see? They see some cotton, right? They think, the first man thinks, this cotton is great. It's much better than hemp. Let's put down, our hemp things and take the cotton with us, and we'll use that instead. The second man, do you think he puts down his bundle of hemp? No. He says, "My goodness, I've been carrying this a really long way. I've got a lot invested in this hemp. It would be a shame to waste all that effort. Let me keep carrying this. You do whatever you want." So the first man, he put down his hemp, picked up the cotton. And as they kept walking, then they kept finding better and better things. So cotton thread, cotton cloth, linen thread, linen cloth. But each time the second man kept saying, no, I've carried this bundle of hemp, right? He's still carrying hemp. It's not even cloth, right? It's just a pile of hemp. He says, "I've carried this a long way. I've put a lot of effort into this. I'll be okay. I'll just keep this hemp." Till eventually they were able to find copper, iron, silver, and last they came across a pile of gold. But this second man, he didn't care. He cared more about this old pile of hemp, even though there was a pile of gold sitting right in front of him. And the first man said, "Listen, here's this gold. Think of all the things we can do with this gold. That's why we've been carrying these things all along, was so we could enjoy them, so we could have benefit from them. Put down your hemp. Let's take this gold back with us." But the second man, he says, no, you don't understand. I've worked very, very hard with this hemp, right? I've taken it a long way. It would be a shame to waste all that work that I've done with this hemp. And eventually, they get back home. And that man who carried the hemp, he wasn't able to do very much with it. He wasn't able to give pleasure to his family, to his friends. He didn't get very much enjoyment out of that hemp. But this second man, this wise man, who knew that he should let go of things that weren't good, that weren't very useful, and that he should pick up those things that are better, that are more useful. He was able to enjoy all that gold. He was able to give enjoyment to his family, to his friends, and in that way have a lot of happiness for a long time. And the Venerable Bhante says, Prince, you are just like that that hemp carrier, that man who, no matter what he saw, he kept carrying that hemp. He was so invested in that hemp. In the same way, you're so invested in these wrong views. You have the truth right in front of you, but you don't pick it up. You hold on to these terrible views, even though they haven't led to your happiness in the past. They won't lead to your happiness in the future. So, finally, Prince Payasi says, very good, Venerable Sir. He says, actually, I was happy with your first story. He says, I was pleased and delighted with the Reverend Kassapa's first parable, but I wanted to hear his quick-witted replies to questions because I thought he was a worthy opponent. So because of this, he was able to hear all these excellent explanations, all these ways for us to understand the Blessed One's teachings, all these ways to learn about the danger of holding on to wrong views. So he says, excellent, Reverend Kassapa, excellent. It is as if someone were to set up what had been knocked down, or to point out the way to one who had got lost, or to bring an oil lamp into a dark place, so that those with eyes could see what was there. So he says, Venerable Bhante, you've cleared things up. For a long time I've had these wrong views. I haven't come into contact with an arahant like you that was able to explain to me about these other worlds, the truth of the heavenly realms, the truth of the bad destinations, the truth of these results of good and bad actions. He says, I go for refuge to the Blessed Lord, to the Dhamma, and to the Sangha. May the Reverend Kassapa accept me from this day forth as a lay follower, as long as life shall last. So, finally, he's willing to go to refuge, go for refuge to the Buddha, to the Dhamma, and to the Sangha. And he says to the Venerable Kassapa, he says, I want to make a great sacrifice. I want to do a big sacrifice. Please tell me how I should do a sacrifice so it will be beneficial to me for a long time. And the Venerable Kassapa says to him, so there are different kinds of sacrifices, King. Many people do a kind of sacrifice where they kill living beings. Sadly, this was a very common way that people thought that they could make merit in the time of the Blessed One. Even now, there are people who believe that you create merit by killing living beings. So, the Venerable Bhante says, there's this first kind of sacrifice where beings are killed. Sometimes even human beings were killed at these sacrifices. But at these kind of sacrifices, many people come, and those participants, they have wrong view, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration. That these are the kinds of people that come to a sacrifice where living beings are killed. He says, Prince, when someone does a sacrifice like this, kills living beings, gives things to people who hold wrong views, who aren't following the Noble Eightfold Path, but they're following the wrong Eightfold Path. He says, a sacrifice like this does not give a lot of merit, does not give a lot of fruit. He says, it's just like there was a farmer who went into the forest, and he went to a place where the ground was very rocky, where the soil wasn't soft, the soil hadn't been loosened, and there were still many tree stumps there. And he would take seeds and scatter them on this land, but he wouldn't take good seeds. he would take old rotten seeds, seeds that had dried too long in the sun, seeds that weren't fertile. And he wouldn't even plant those seeds into the soil correctly. Not only that, but there would be no rain to water those one or two good seeds that might still be alive. So do you think, Prince, that farmer is going to get a nice crop from that sort of planting? And the prince says no. And the Venerable Bhante says, in the same way, Prince, a sacrifice where living beings are killed, a sacrifice where people come who have wrong views, you make gifts to people with wrong views, that sacrifice will not be very fruitful. There won't be much merit in that sacrifice. But there's another kind of sacrifice, another kind of offering that's made, where living beings are not killed. No one has to die for this kind of sacrifice. And people who hold right view come to this kind of sacrifice. People with right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right mindfulness, right effort, right concentration. At this kind of a sacrifice, at this kind of a merit making, there'll be a lot of good results. It's just like a farmer would go into the forest and he would find a place where the tree stumps had been dug up, the rocks had been taken out of the soil had been loosened up, and he would take good seeds that were very fertile, that had been well protected, well taken care of, and he would plant those seeds in the right way into the soil. And then the rain would come. What do you think, Prince? Would that farmer get a lot of results from his effort? And the prince says, yes, surely he would get a lot of good results from working in this way. And the Venerable Bhante says, in the same way, you need to make an offering like this. You need to make a sacrifice where no living beings are killed, where people come who are practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. That when you make a gift in that sort of way, then there'll be a lot of merit to be had. So, the prince, very fortunate to have met this Venerable Bhante, says sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And he decides that he'll set up an almshouse. So he pays respect to the Venerable Bhante and goes back home. So just imagine how much patience this Bhante had to have, right? He must have known that this prince had the ability to understand. He had such great compassion. He had such great wisdom to be able to explain to the prince the right way to do research, the right way to understand the nature of this reality. So the prince goes home, and he's excited now. He's developed right view. He understands that there's good things to be gained from the practice of giving. He understands that there's good results from good actions and bad results from bad actions. So he's going to set up a place where people can come and get food, people who need food, whether they're Brahmins, whether they're monks or nuns, whether they're poor people, anyone can come and get something to eat, can get something to wear. So he's never done this before. This is his first time. So he goes to his storeroom to find out what he has that he can give away. And he notices that when they come to the bottom of a bag of rice, a barrel of rice, that in the bottom, all that's left behind are broken pieces of rice. And he sees that his servants, that they don't usually use that rice to make food for him, that they just get rid of that broken rice. So the prince thinks, I know what I can do with that. I'll give that away. I'll cook that for people. And then he notices that there's some pickle brine in some other barrels. Right? People had preserved some vegetables in vinegar, and when all the vegetables were gone, all that was left was this pickle brine. And he thinks, perfect. We'll use that to flavor the rice. So we'll make this rice porridge with the broken rice that we were going to throw away anyway, and we'll flavor it with this vinegar that we were going to throw away anyway. So before I knew about merit, I would have just thrown this away. But now I know that there's still something good to be had from it. I can make some merit through offering this. And I'd like to give away some clothing. So let's see, what do we have? And he found a storeroom that just had old rags in it. So rags that had been first used for clothing and then maybe were used for cleaning afterwards. And now they were terrible, right? Not even good for cleaning. But someone had stored them away, thinking that maybe someday there might be some use for them. And so the prince thinks, perfect. We were just going to throw these away anyway. Now we can give them away. I'll practice generosity. I'll make some merit. It'll be great. Is this the way the Blessed One taught us to practice generosity? No. You're very fortunate. You've heard the Blessed One's instructions in great detail how to practice generosity. But this Prince Payasi, he didn't understand. He only understood a little bit. So he appointed one of his workers, a Brahmin named Uttara. He said, organize this dana in this way. These are my instructions. Use this broken rice, use this old vinegar, and give away this old cloth. So Uttara said, okay, very good, and set up this almshouse. And Uttara, whenever he would give this food away, he would do it himself. He made sure that he was the one that gave the gift. And as he would give this offering to people, each time he would say, may I be connected with Prince Payasi in this life through this gift, but may I not be connected with him in future lives. So each time he made this offering, he would say this, may I be connected with the prince in this life, but not in future lives. In this life, but not in future lives. So, of course, news of this got back to the prince. And he thought, what? That doesn't make any sense. Aren't we giving things so we have good results in the future? Aren't we supposed to believe in future results of good actions that we do now? So he told someone, go get that Uttara. Let's get to the bottom of this. Let's find out why he's saying that. So he brings Uttara into the palace and says, okay, is this true that every time you give someone some of my alms food, you say, may I be connected with the prince in this life, but not in future lives? And Uttara says, yes, that's true. The prince says, why? Don't we expect to get results from the act of giving? And he says, but Lord, the food you give, this broken rice with this vinegar, it's disgusting. It's terrible food. You wouldn't even want to touch this food with your foot, let alone eat it. And this clothing that you're giving away, it's terrible. You don't even use this kind of cloth for a rug. You don't even want to walk on this kind of cloth, let alone put it on your body. You're very dear to us, right? We love you. You're very good to us. How could we connect someone who's so dear with an offering like this? And so the prince says, okay, well, what should I do? How should I give a gift? And Uttara is very wise, and he cares about the prince's welfare. And so he says, you need to give the same kind of food that you eat. You need to give the same kind of cloth that you wear. And so the prince says, very good. You can set up my offering in this way. So, not long after this, both the prince and this Brahmin Uttara pass away. And because they practice generosity, They were born in a heavenly destination. So there was a monk who had a habit of going to an empty heavenly mansion to rest in the afternoon. So he must have had psychic powers, and after his alms food, he would use his psychic powers to go to an empty vimana, an empty mansion, and rest for the day. And so one day he went to this mansion, and instead of being empty, he saw that there was a devata living in this mansion. And so he said to the devata, "Oh, who are you? Where did you come from?" And the devata says, "Oh, in my former birth, I was Prince Payasi." And the monk says, "Oh, I remember you. But aren't you the one that held all sorts of wrong views? Didn't you say that there's no other world? That there's no being spontaneously reborn? That there's no results of good and bad action? How is it that you were born here?" And the devata says, "Well, fortunately I met a good monk who changed my mind. He taught me right view. And not only that, I set up an almshouse, and I practiced generosity." And the monk, the Venerable Bhante, said to him, "But didn't you have an employee set up that, give away those alms? Where's he? Didn't he pass away as well?" And the devata says, "Yes, that's true. But because of the way I gave the gift, I was born here in the realm of the four great kings. Why is that? Even though I practiced generosity, I did so grudgingly. Someone had to really urge me to do the gift. I didn't give that gift with my own hands. I hired someone else out to do it. I didn't give the gift thoughtfully, and I gave things that I was going to throw away anyway. So I didn't give in a very skillful way. But my friend, my employee, Uttara, he gave the dana very generously. He always made sure to give with his own hands. He gave very thoughtfully. And he's the one that encouraged me not to give things that I was throwing away, but to give the best things that I could, the same kind of things that I ate, the same kind of clothing that I wore." And so, because of that, because of his wholesome way of practicing generosity, he was born in the realm of the 33 gods, in the Tavatimsa heaven. So see what an excellent result there is to be had from giving. He said to this venerable monk, "Please, when you go back to the human world, teach people about practicing generosity. Teach them about the proper way to practice dana. Tell them about the results that I've experienced. Tell them about the results that this Uttara has experienced, being born in a much higher heavenly realm." And so the Bhante said, "Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. This is what people need to know." So today we've heard this excellent story of this Prince Payasi. We can think about how dangerous it was for him to hold all of these wrong views. How for such a long time he never came into contact with good friends, people to teach him the right way to do research, to teach him about the noble research that our great teacher, the Blessed One, did. Not only that, but we heard all the disadvantages of holding on to these wrong views, right? That he was, even after he understood that he had wrong views, he was still ready to hold on to them, just out of fear for being criticized by other people with wrong views. But the Blessed One says there's some kind of criticism that we should pay attention to, and sometimes some criticism that we shouldn't. When foolish people criticize us, we don't need to pay attention to those words. It's when wise people criticize us. That's when we need to pay attention. That's when we need to change our actions. So this prince had the great opportunity to find a noble friend. When we have good friends, noble friends, what opportunity do we have? We have the opportunity to listen to the Blessed One's Dhamma. When we have the opportunity to listen to the Dhamma, then we have the chance to reflect on it wisely. And having reflected on it wisely, we can put these teachings into practice. And it's through putting these teachings into practice that we, for ourselves, are able to understand the true nature of this reality. Right? It's not by cooking people in a jar and looking for their soul to escape. Right? Turning them this way and that. Right? Looking for their soul. Not by asking our friends, when you die, please come back and tell me. Tell me what it's like. We don't need to do research in that way. Fortunately, we have the Blessed One's research to learn, to study, and to follow very well. So today, having heard these excellent teachings of the Supreme Buddha, may we always keep them in mind. May we reflect on them well. May we practice them well. And through the power of this merit, may we one day realize the Four Noble Truths in this Gautama Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo Buddhaya.